Hey everybody, welcome to another Into the Terminal. Today, we're going to be doing a search and replace deathmatch. So Nate, get ready for the death.
For the
Because
death.
I'm going
I
to
didn't
search
bring
and
any.
replace the hardest.
Yeah, I didn't bring any like weapons to defend myself with. So hopefully we're just death matching with search and replace.
So this came up with an idea of like, how do we do search and replace in various places on the system or different methods of doing it. So Nate and I sat down and we brainstormed a whole bunch of different ways that we've used search and replace over the years. And if we jump into the terminal, I'll kick us off with editor search and replace.
Yeah, and I'll admit that in some cases these were things I'd never used in the past, but we decided to explore them anyway.
All right. So what I did set up for my first search and replace is I created this example zone, right, which is just a DNS zone file. And so if you manage DNS, it's really easy to start with an example and then copy it to be your domain. So we'll do copy example zone to be called my domain as scottsdomain.com. All right. So, but when we look at the contents inside the file, it's still the same as the original template, right? But we now need to update it to be my domain extension. And you can see that a bunch of different places throughout this document, there's example.com as the domain extension. So in VI, you could do search and replace using the following method. Use colon, that opens up the secondary command line for you. You give the range of lines that you want to operate your search and replace over. So I'm going to start at line 1, and $sign in VI means the end of something. So because I'm using it in the context of a line number, it means the end of the file, the last line in the file. So from line 1 to end of file, I'm going to substitute example.com for Scott's domain.com. And then the last thing I'm going to do on here is I'm going to add in a G to do a global search and replace. Sometimes, depending on what search and replace mechanism you're using, your search and replacement could end on the first match on a line and not look any further. So the G says I want to do it globally. So on that start of authority record as an example, up there towards the top, so you have there's 2 examples of example.com. I'm going to replace both of them because I'm doing the search and replace globally, all occurrences on all lines.
So
All right.
Vincent mentions this in the chat, and it's the exact same thing I was about to mention. You don't have to do the $1, you could just do a %. That'll do the whole file.
You could, but I like using $1 because one, I remember $sign means end of stuff, and I use it in things all the time, right? Like $, delete to the end of the line, or $sign, move to the end of the file, right? The last line, or colon dollar.
Is that because the buck stops here?
No, but great attempt at a dad joke. The other thing I like about doing it this method is I can actually line constrain it. I use the same exact syntax if I want to do lines 10 to 30, right?
Yeah, I guess that's valid, right? I just a point, right? And the fact that Vincent brought it up, I thought it was worth mentioning.
Sure.
But this is a death match after all.
Well, you get your chance to land a blow after I'm finished with mine, Nate. Like, come on.
Okay.
Like,
Okay.
all right. So I'm just going to enter on this command, and you can see that all occurrences of example.com have been replaced with scottsdomain.com. So there you go. $1, or sorry, colon, $1, s / the search string / replacement string /g. And I'll do one more. Maybe I don't have 10.0.1.2 as my IP address scheme. Maybe it's
Who
$1,
wouldn't?
10.0. For 86.32. Right. So
Now, Some searches treat the dot as a special character. I guess Vim does not. Otherwise, it would have, or maybe it does, and it just happened to match in this case. And you have to escape it if you want to be specific to a dot.
Oh, we're gonna go down the full-on rabbit hole, huh, Nate? That's what you
Well,
want
we
to
don't
do.
have to. I'm just saying, right? In regular expressions, dot has a special meaning, or it'll match a dot, or it'll match that character if that character is a dot anyway.
So, all right. So, what Nate is alluding to is that first search string, right? And the one that I just typed, it's 86.32 dot. That's the search string that I'm looking for. That's actually not a literal string. That is a regular expression.
Right.
And in regular expressions, a period character is a single character wildcard.
Right.
So,
That's what I was getting at.
right. And so the reason it works here is because I don't have anything that's 86 something, 32 something other than IP addresses. But if I did something doofy, like,
If you had like a number in there that was 865324, then it would match.
all right, so colon one comma dollar, substitute 86.32 dot.
There you go. You can see
Right.
it already that it's highlighting it. So yeah.
Yeah. So that's because instead of literal dots, the dot means any wildcard character, and I happen to have another pattern in this file. It's 86 something, 32 something, and that matched my regular expression. Um, Typically, you will not see goofy, weird names like this, so it's generally pretty safe to do a search and replace for IP addresses using just like the regular IP address formatting. But yes, that search thing that you're looking for is a regular expression, which can cause weird matches if you don't have clean data.
Yeah. If you put a backslash before each of those dots, I think it'll literally treat it as a dot.
Yeah,
Yeah. There you go.
indeed. All right, so that's first search and replace in an editor. You can do a global search and replace on the secondary command line in VI. I gave you a couple of examples of how it works, and then we talked some more about kind of what you're putting in there.
I still
Nate,
think we should have included just manually changing stuff in an editor, don't you think? Take the
I
whole
mean, I could do
episode.
that. I could go in and like spend 20 minutes editing the file, and that'd be riveting, riveting YouTube programming.
Riveting. All right. So our next example is I think everybody's favorite alternative to edit it to search and replace manually in a file, or not manually, but even with a string in a file, and that's sed. Right? If like find me an administrator that hasn't used sed, and I'll find one that doesn't have a lot of experience in the field. So I have a couple of examples with sed. They're relatively simple. First, we're gonna just show you the file I'm working with here. It's really simple. Like Scott went and made a real world example. I just made a text file with numbers in it because whatever. Um, Obviously, Scott put more work into his examples than I did. So the cool thing about sed is that you can modify things inline, right? Which is great for when you're doing things like searching. I can't tell you the number of times that I've been looking for a string in like a log file or something, and I've used these weird concatenations of like sed and awk and grep and all these other command line tools to transform the outputs into something that's easier for me to parse as a human being, or easy to find a certain thing, right? So what we're going to do is just show that quick. We're just going to do the same thing. We're just going to pipe it through sed. And I usually like to put these inside a single quotes just to make sure we don't end up with anything weird, but you don't necessarily have to. All right, so we're going to use
I mean,
sed, and we're going to just change a number. Oh,
using it in
what?
single quotes is recommended because that search string, that first thing in that first section of your slash uh, format, is
Right.
a expression, and things like the stars means something in regular expressions that are different than on the shell. So you need to make sure that it's protected from the shell
Right.
extending that wildcard character.
Right.
So
That's exactly
same
why I do it that way.
what to use.
Right. So there we go. We do that. You can see I've just replaced the number 1 with the number 100 to the same example as we did before, right? With those regular expressions. I think if I did a dot 2 here, it would do the same thing, right? It would say, it would take my spaces and treat them as a wildcard, right? It did. Look at that. So you can see now that where up in this example, I have 102, right? In this example, I have 100, and then the 2 is gone, and it goes to 3 because I replaced with that dot. The dot is a regular expression. It says to treat the space as, because it's a wildcard, because the original string was 1 space 2, right? But down, let's see, there's a line here where we have 2 is not trailing the number 1. Should be like right here. See, number 2 is the first one on the line. It didn't get changed, even though it was in the expression. This 1 also didn't get changed because it doesn't have a space and a 2 after it, right? So there's some good examples. But another cool thing with sed, let me reset the screen here. You can modify a file in place with sed. And the number of times I've used this in like a post install script or something where I'm trying to change a bunch of files at once, you just do sed -I, which I think stands for in place. Maybe I'm wrong there. And then the same old string. We're going to beat up on the number 2 this time, and we're going to change it to 200, right? And then we're going to give the name of the file. Okay, and now if I cat the file, you can see there that 2 was replaced with 200 in the file, which, can be handy if you're changing a bunch of config files, or, if you want to make a script that says change the SSHD configuration so that password authentication yes is changed to password authentication no, right? So these are good examples of where this comes in handy. So there you go. There's sed. I'm sure there's more advanced use cases that we could go into with sed, but well, let's be honest, I didn't prepare anymore. What's your favorite use for sed, Scott?
I actually use it like this, where it's an in-place edit to a file,
Yeah.
or I'll use it as part of a pipeline where I'll get some data and actually I do a lot of like stripping of data using sed. So you could do something like sed s/2// right, which would
Oh
actually
yeah,
like
you can just drop it out. Or you could like I don't know, say I wanted to make all of the number 3s a carriage return or a new line or whatever. You can do /r or is it /n? I always forget.
/n.
That should know. Is it /n? Did I get it wrong? No, it worked. There we go. So now I've like randomly replaced, not randomly, I've replaced all the number 3s with a new line. So that's also sometimes fun. Or not fun, but useful.
Well, I will see your setting and I'll raise you purling because who doesn't love Perl?
I love Perl. It was my first language. Aside from Bash, I guess you could say.
All right. So another
Perl.
thing that I use a lot is Perl inline edits. So Perl -pi, which is an in-place edit, and -e, this is the edit that I want to perform. And so just like we do with sed, we use our substitution. And let's do com dot with org dot. Well, what's really cool with Perl is you can actually do multiple edits on the same line. So we could also do 10.0 dot with 192.168 dot.
And I forget the syntax, but you can also tell Perl to make a backup of the file as it's changing it.
Maybe I messed
There
it up.
was did you typo it? Didn't you put this in your notes?
Well, I did just one dash E, and I was trying to be fancy and do two
Oh.
at
See, maybe you can't
one,
do two at once.
and I'll have to look at the syntax for two. But you can do multiple in the same line, but I don't have it off the top of my head. Oh, and I probably also need the G. All right.
And Rick, Perl
And
doesn't get enough love these days because everybody switched to Python. Rick's in the chat
so
talking about Perl.
you can see all of the comms changed to orgs, except that one, because when I originally made my edit, I didn't use the trailing G to indicate that I
Oh yeah.
wanted to globally make the change. So I changed the first one on the line and then was like, okay, next line, moving on. So let me re-execute that one with the correct syntax. This one, G. There we go. And now everything looks the way I want. So I use Perl this way. Um, one, because I know that I can use it in scripts. I use it a lot in like automated installs, post installation instructions. Um,
Yep.
and you can get more fancy in your Perling than just search and replace with like we do with sed, right? Like how I'm using it now is really no different than sed, but you can get more fancy. And Perl also supports extended regular expressions. So if you need to get really exact on what you're replacing, it has the ability to do so.
Right. We had at the web host that I worked at, we had this tome that one of the previous admins had written of, he called it the notorious one-liners. And they were all different Perl one-liners that he'd cooked up because Perl is great for one-liner commands like that. And it just, that's where I learned, because he had one that we would modify. We had like thousands of DNS records, DNS zones that we were managing because we were a web host. And if we had to change all of them for some reason, he had a one-liner that would touch all of them, but it would also make backups of all the files while it did it, which was pretty cool, which is why I remember that you can do that, but I don't remember the syntax because I always just copied it.
Oh, Shantanu says servers without Perl are unhappy servers. That warms my heart because everybody always likes to make fun of me for using Perl.
I know, I like Perl. Perl was a great language.
Is. We just
It
released
is
a
a
new
great
version of it.
language. It's just not used so often anymore. All right. So, of course, the dogs are barking. I don't know if you guys can hear them, but sorry about that. My next example is, and this is the one where I was specifically referring to when I said I don't do this in the real world, but we decided to try it out, is awk. Did you know you can replace text with awk? Like, awk is an actual scripting language. Most people just use it for inline, or I've always used it for inline translation or picking a column out of a text, a string of text or something like that. Because the way awk works is it'll take a line of text that it's parsing and it'll chop it up based on a field separator that you've given it. So it'll take line by line and column by column, right? So if you had a CSV file, for example, you could chop it up based on the commas, and then you'd have columns, individual items in an array that you can deal with awk. But you can do replacements with awk, and we're going to show you the file I'm using here. This one's just colors instead of numbers, and they're not just a repeating pattern like it was for the numbers, because I have a couple examples I'm going to try to use here. Now, the other thing I couldn't figure out, I don't know if I just couldn't figure it out or if you can't do this with awk, but I couldn't do in-place file edits. I could only do, like, it'll take the file and change it on the screen. So I think the only way to write it back out, unless there's something I missed, is to just redirect the output back into the file.
So awk is often supplemented with sed.
Yes.
So you like do an awk thing and then send it to sed, who actually does the editing thing.
Right. Right. So that's exactly what that's what I'm guessing, right? That's what I was guessing from what I had figured out. All right. So this first example, what it's going to do is, and this is actually kind of neat that it'll do this in line. So this particular one line command is going to replace just one line in a text file, right? So what this is I'm defining the line to work with. That's line number 4. And then it's going to replace the whole line with the word replaced, right? So line number 4 should be this last one, purple, red, green, right? So if we run this, there you go. Now the last line is replaced, but it didn't touch the other lines. And of course, if I just change that NR to like 2, it'll replace the second line, right? Which is really handy. But again, the file wasn't changed. It just changed what was on the screen. So I could imagine a case where, you're trying to parse a log file or something, or I don't know, a file that you know the structure of it, you know what line you want to change. You could do this and then redirect the output to something else, something like that. So there's one example. Now,
You can use like a redirect operator to overwrite that file, could you?
yeah, so I mean, what you could do is just redirect it back to file 2, and then it would overwrite the file as it goes. I don't want to do that because it'll mess up the rest of my examples. But if I did it to like file, I don't know, 6. Oh, maybe not. Oh, I forgot the. There is no file 6. I forgot the actual redirect. And then there we go. File 6 is changed. So, and Bash is good about take that output and redirect it to the file I just read. So if you want to change the file in place, you could redirect it back to itself. But again, I don't want to do that because it might mess up the rest of my examples. All right. The next example is you could replace the first occurrence of a string in each line. Let me copy this one out of my notes. Awk is hard to type. So I definitely want to copy and paste this. There's lots of like curly braces and lots of parentheses and commas. And like, if you don't get them just right, it's all messed up. All right. So we're going to change the word red to the word crimson. Now, this only affects the first instance on each line. And I think the format is you add another comma. And I didn't test this, so sorry if it doesn't work. But remember that global that you were doing with your search and replaces? I think this will do. Did it? Let's see. No, it just didn't do anything. So apparently, no, that's not how that works. I saw another example that used the G, so I thought it did. All right. So there you go. You can see. Let's see. Where's crimson? Here's a crimson. Is there a red that I didn't get? I thought I used red because there were cases where red was there twice. Apparently not. But it does replace the first instance of each one. If there was another red on one of these lines, it wouldn't get it. So if someone in the chat knows the global command for replacements in awk, let me know. We can try it out live. All right, and I have one more example. This one, this is the reason I'm using this one is because it shows you how incredibly complicated awk gets as you go. So this is going to be replace letters in a string in specifically column 2. Remember how I said it works with columns, right? It works with, comma or space separated. It defaults to space separated. So you can see that this is like, what is going on here? Right? there's a bunch of strings in here, which, to be honest, some of these I got from examples. I don't actually know what this is doing. Begin fs equals ofs equals quote quote. Like, what does that actually do? I don't know. But I can tell you that $2 right here says work with the second item in the array, right? That's a common said thing. Here's that G I was talking about that I thought would work in the other replacement, but doesn't seem to. Maybe I had it in the wrong column. I don't know. And then here's, of course, it's telling you which one to replace, and I think which one to print after the replacement happens. That's why that second $2 is in there. And then there's print, just tells it to print the thing that it worked on. So now what it's going to do is it'll change specifically the letter E in column 2 to the number 0, because I figured that would stand out nicely. So you can see, like the E in red did not get changed, but the 2 E's in green got changed to zeros, and the E in blue did not, right? Same thing with orange and the other reds here. So again, I could see how this might be useful. But, like if you have a specific use case where you know the structure of your data within the text file. All right, so any awk comments that...
the FS, OFS, quote, or quote, space quote, that's saying the field separator for your input is equal to the output field separator when it's printing. And both space character. So it's basically setting your field separator for input and output as the space character.
So see people saying use gsub. Is it the same syntax? Just
Yep.
like that?
Yep.
Oh, cool. Except we picked a, what if, let's see, do I have any that are repeated? I don't
I mean,
think
you
I
could just
do.
put in a red somewhere.
Yeah. Let's just add another red to the first line here. There we go. And if I do it with just sub again, we should see that that second red doesn't get replaced.
Yeah. Substitution versus global substitution.
There we go. So simple as that. All right, and that's awk. Now you can see why people don't use awk for substitution, because it seems like it could be super powerful, but we have lots of other tools that seem to work a little better.
Well, I think it's as you get more complex in what you're trying to search and replace, awk opens up doors for you that would not be open if you were to use something like sed, because sed is more simplistic in how it operates,
Right.
right? So you can
But
like limit to certain columns or scope to a certain period or a section of the file, things like that.
right. But I think there's still better tools to do that. Like Perl, for example, could do all of this. And probably, I mean, Perl's hard to like Perl has this reputation of being hard to read after you've written it. Awk feels like it's the same in the same boat.
Well, because I think Perl really was kind of the replacement for both a combination of sed and awk.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah. All right. So I'm going to do something really dumb.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to use search and replace, but mashing it into a find command as well.
Now I can imagine reasons that you'd want to do this, right? You don't know what files contain the string. You want to replace it everywhere. You could use find to find the thing and then use other tools to make the replacement.
Uh, Apache. All right. Oh, and I probably want to do this in place
Oh, yes. Otherwise, it'll just do it
on screen,
on
which
screen.
I actually don't think there are any instances of this in Etsy, but we'll call it good. So we're going to find all the files in Etsy, and on each one of them, we're then going to execute a sed command. I actually think this is really crazy because Nate, as you mentioned, um, you said something like it'll go ahead and execute it on all the files,
Yeah.
whether it's there or not. But that brings up a good point, which is like, do I really want to go through all the files in Etsy and make this blind change in place, assuming that I know what's in there and it's in the right spot? I don't know.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, what you could, no, I guess you couldn't, not with this command. Oh, you
Oh,
must have forgot to close something.
I forgot to close these
You
quotes.
didn't close the double quotes, it looks like.
Yes.
There you go.
All right. So these are all the errors for files that was not able to make a set on,
Yep.
but it very
Rick brought
quietly
that up.
made edits on all the files, and I have no idea what was actually changed because I did it in place and I didn't say what it should be.
You can,
So
I guess you couldn't even use print to tell you because it'll just print every file it found.
yes, I mean I
Yeah.
could maybe do a compound command on my execute, which
Yeah.
is maybe do this. Um,
Now he's going off script, folks.
yeah. So this would first grep for this string in the file,
Yeah.
and then we'll execute the sed. And I'm going to go ahead and also redirect my error messages so we don't get anything.
If you do a, you can specify the type in your find to be files only. That's what Rick brought up in the chat.
Yeah, but like Etsy wget.rc, like that's not a directory, right? That's and this is not a directory. So maybe that would eliminate some of the errors, like this one up here.
Good point.
Um,
So why is it saying it's no such file or directory for wget-rc?
I don't know.
The mysteries of shell.
I told you to do a bunch of stuff with no cares in the world on what, and then you're like, well, why is it giving an error? I don't know. I did something horrible. But this is a place on steroids where I care not, and I'll just like destroy update everything.
Update everything. The boss said do it, I did it.
That's right. Here's what's right or works or will survive a reboot.
Ay. All right. So after Scott has replaced everything in Etsy, hold on, let me switch us over to my next example here. All right, so we talked about Perl. We'd be remiss if we didn't also talk about Python. Python doesn't make it as easy to do stuff inline. Like you can, but it gets ugly quick. And I thought it'd be a better way to use Python to make ourselves a little bit of a utility, right? So what I made is a Python script called replacer. And what replacer does is, obviously it brings in some libraries that it needs in order to do the stuff that it's doing. I actually added some error checking into it that says if you run this thing without the right number of arguments, it gives you an output that says, hey, you did it wrong. So, super cool right there. Then it'll take 3 arguments. One is the file you want to make replacements in, the thing you want to replace, and the thing you want to replace it with. And then it just opens up the file and does the replacement, right? So let me show you how it works. So there we go. We run replacer, and it gives me the output. It says what I have to put in there. If I did like replacer, I have to do / on what was it, file 3? I think I was going to use for this one. Nope, not 2, 3. Again, it'll say the same thing because I didn't give it what to replace with. Let me show you what this file is first. And fair warning, I've been watching a show on Amazon all about Lord of the Rings. So it inspired this file. So we've got a bunch of names of wizards and hobbits and elves from the Lord of the Rings series. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use replacer. I'm going to use file 3, and we're going to replace Elrond with the word elf. And then if we look at file 3, there we go. Elrond is now just an elf. So there you go. That's actually a pretty simple example. It probably took me longer to write that script than it did to show it to you guys. So if you want to use Python to do this stuff, again, you might be able to do this inline. The problem is Python is so strict about its indentation and whatnot. I wasn't sure how I would pipe through Python and get all the syntax right. Right? With Perl, it's easy. You just put semicolons to go to the next line, and I don't know how you do that with Python. I guess I'm just not a good Python developer.
There's still time, Nate. There's still time.
There's still time to be a good Python developer. No, everyone's moved on to something else now. I don't know how developers keep up with this stuff.
We're writing everything Rust. I mean, Go. I mean, no.
Okay. I'm still like they insisted I had to learn Ruby at one point, and where'd that go?
Man, I'm sorry.
I never learned Ruby, by the way.
It's like people write in Java.
I know, right?
All right.
You've got a bonus, don't you, that you were going to show us?
Last. So this is actually not a search and replace command, but instead is a command line shortcut search and replace. So a lot of times I'll do something like let's see, http conf.d, right? So I like look in this directory. I'm like, oh, I need to go over there. I need to edit that file, right? So what you can do is, or maybe I want to CD to it. You can use the character to replace from your previous command, take out this string and put in this string and then re-execute the command. right? And
That's
it actually
handy.
told me what command it ran
That's
before it ran.
good. That's
Yeah.
good.
So
There's sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say this is something that, especially if you're using like big, long, unwieldy strings or file names, and then you have to edit the file, or you need to change you need to change permissions on it, or whatever. You can swap out pieces of the command for other things.
Yeah,
Um,
and you could, and it doesn't have to be the first word in the command, right? You could replace like something in the middle.
so I could do something like this, and then go, oh wait, I want the instead of
I wanted SSH instead or something. Yeah.
um, that. Oh no, substitution failed.
No good.
Yeah, I
Is
think
it
it's
because of the
slash.
slashes? Does it not like the slashes?
What happens when you use emacs shortcuts? See,
I know, I know. There's other cool shortcuts like that, like bang bang will repeat the last command, which is handy for if like you forgot to type sudo. I like that one.
oh, I see David Washington said he likes using the caret when he typos something. So he can just like take out the typo and replace it with something not typoed in this big, long, nasty command.
There you
Yeah,
go.
that's a great idea for how to use that search and replace on the command line.
Yeah, the number of times I've used the up arrow and then gone back, like used back and left and right to get to the thing that I typoed and then have to change it. It probably does waste a bit of time, right? Especially if it's a longer command. I've had some of these like, you're trying to run a Podman container and there's like a billion command line arguments you threw in there to map in volumes and you got something wrong at the beginning of the command, right? So you have to like hit the up arrow and then decide whether it's quicker to hit the home button to get to the beginning and then go back or whatever. Yeah. Anyway, could be helpful.
Uh,
Could be helpful.
Shantanu asked what the command line history looked like when you used that caret replacement,
Hmm.
and uh, it looks the way you would expect, where it's the list of commands that you ran. The caret replacement is really just a shell built-in, actually a shell editor shortcut. So when I
Hmm.
did that replacement of ls for cd, it actually executed a command, which was cd to this directory, which is why it shows up that way in the history instead of like weird shell caret replacement syntax.
Shantanu says just use set-o vim, but then these wouldn't work, right?
That's true. So by default, Bash uses the Emacs editor as its shell editor. So things like this caret replacement is an Emacs thing. The other thing I use a lot is escape period. Right. So if I right uh, vi escape period. So that escape period combination to pull the last token from your previous command into your current spot in the command line, that is also an Emacs shortcut. So if you use set minus OVI to change your command line editor from Emacs to VI, now you have to use VI commands for doing these things. Um, so things like um, I don't know. It's been a minute since I've used VI for my command line editor. Actually, it's been like 20 VI for my command line editor. Uh,
Is that where stuff like Control L
A,
comes from to clear the screen? Or well, I guess Control D logout is not from Emacs, is it?
nope, that's
Okay.
that's a control character you're typing in. But like instead
Okay.
of using up arrow to go through your history, you'd use escape K, right? Because you're like using the K command to move up through your history. That's what you do
Oh,
with or VI, which I don't know. I just added to my lexicon of command line shortcuts, and over the
yeah.
years built it. And
Yeah.
even though it's Emacs, and I feel somewhat guilty about using Emacs, like it's only 3 commands or 5 commands that I use. So
It's
that's
it's just further cemented that Emacs will can never go away because it's built into Bash. We'd all have to learn something new if we got rid of Emacs.
all right. So that was the death match. Who has a favorite? Who was the winner of the death match? I don't know. Was it said?
Yeah,
Was it Perl-PI-E? Was
it's
it
not Awk.
a custom written Python script that was fancy, super
I put
fancy.
like half an hour of work into that thing. It better win.
Leave it to you guys. Leave a comment. Tell us in the chat. Don't forget to mash that like and subscribe. Next week, man, we're gonna have a really nice show next week.
I think
I've
so.
this show for like months because we came up with this idea months ago, and it's like, okay, that'll be our last show of the year.
Yeah.
Hey, what are we doing next week?
We're going to show you all the things you should never do on a Linux machine. In other words, we're going to repeatedly break a machine over and over and over again, or several machines, I guess is probably more likely.
Yeah, but not just break it, like straight up destroy it. Like this is you do this, you'll be looking for a new job, buddy. Like
Yeah.
do
Don't
this.
do this in production. That's what we should call the episode. Don't do this in production.
Revenue generating events.
There you go.
Or not revenue,
Resume.
Resume
Generating events. Yeah, I mean, of course, Rick, rm-rf/, like that's going to be there.
It doesn't work.
I know. There's like safeguards now.
I'll show you because it's so crazy.
We've had to put safeguards around everything nowadays, man. Like you can't run with scissors anymore. We can't ride in the back of pickup trucks, and rm-rf/ tells you like it stops you. It's just yeah, terrible.
I mean, who really wanted to rm-rf/? I don't know anyone who actually wanted to do that did it. So maybe it's
Probably nobody.
yeah.
But you know that goes down in history as like the Linux will let you do anything, assuming you know what you're doing.
So I have a workaround to this that will make it just as easily horrible. There's just a
Okay,
one change.
you'll
We'll see you next.
everyone will just have to wait until next week.
That's right. That's right. But yeah, so next week we'll just be like repeatedly destroying machines in interesting and fun ways.
Repeatedly destroying machines in interesting and fun ways. Sounds like a fun episode. I got to cook up some fun ones. I had a great idea that Scott and I were talking about before the show that I'm not going to share, assuming that it ends as spectacularly terrible as I think it will, but we'll see. All right, folks. So yeah, this has been a fun episode. And yeah, I think we're done for today. So everyone should have a great weekend, right? That's where we have to go next. The weekend.
If you're a deferred viewer, please feel free to leave comments. Nate and I do respond to comments. And those of you who joined us live, always a pleasure to see you all. And we'll see you next time.
Yep. Have a great one, everybody.